Hey, what's up, everybody? This is a very special episode of House of the Empire on Phantom Empire. I'm Zach, and I'm here with Sean and Mike Bish. We finally got the intro. We didn't get one in the pilot episode, but we finally got one for episode 2, and it's so immersive that we felt like it warranted a special episode just to talk about that. So that's what this one is. If you want the full breakdown, that is coming up in another episode, but we're not going to jump too far ahead or get too far ahead of ourselves. Sean, I, for one, know that this is something you've been anticipating since pretty much the show was announced, how similar, how different it would end up. Just initial thoughts. How did you feel about how everything played out?
So they made a slip a few weeks ago and posted an interview that I think's gonna come out tomorrow. And then a website yanked it down, and it was one of the reputable places. I can't remember which one it was, which basically clarified that it was the intro. But unless you're listening to like the first 20 seconds, the rest of it sounds basically identical. The first 20 seconds, there's some different instruments in there. Uh, but after that, I think it's pretty identical. And I'll be honest, I don't know if they had another choice to make, considering where the fandom was and needing to relate to the other show. Uh, I absolutely loved it. Hair was standing up on my arms. It was amazing. I just tweeted out that there was basically only one choice they could make, and they didn't screw it up. And kudos to them. I just thought maybe the melody would be the same, but I thought instrumental and tone would be different. And it wasn't. So I thought that was an interesting take. But hey, it's Game of Thrones, and I'm all for it. Although I'll say this, fellas, I don't know what we're staring at. Is it the what he's working on, Old Valyria? Is that what we're seeing in the intro? Because I don't know the structure.
It doesn't look too familiar to me. I have a couple of theories, but I want to give the floor to Mike before we get too far deeper into the discussion. Mike, I honestly haven't done a whole lot of episodes with you. Our schedules have never been able to align all that much. Just like in a minute, tell me like some of your past experiences with Game of Thrones and how that kind of influenced your perception on this intro.
I was late to the Game of Thrones, I guess, fandom and show in general. I didn't start watching until coming up on season 7, so I was really behind the 8 ball. So I'm assuming same for you. But it's something once I started, I just really got hooked on. It was honestly one of those shows that I had never seen anything like it before. So I didn't know if I would like it. Just based off what I heard, I was like, that's not a show for me. It's something that I just wouldn't be into, just not my style. And after that first episode, I was really hooked, and I couldn't stop binging it. I binged it very very quickly. I loved season 7. Um, I'm in the minority. I'm not gonna hate too much on season 8. Um, I enjoyed it to an extent. But I'm not out here. I'm not, one of those people out here just trashing season 8. I thought it was pretty solid. Rushed, of course. You can kind of tell that. But as far as the intro, I was kind of, I don't want to say hoping, but I was wondering, I was interested to see if they would go anywhere different. I know Sean said they didn't really have a choice, but I don't know, man. Because the reason that I may disagree with that is because just watching that first episode, it feels like Game of Thrones. So I
Hmm.
don't know if they technically needed to do this intro, but guess what? I'm not going to sit here and complain because the first thing I tweeted once I saw it is it gave me goosebumps. It takes me
Hmm.
back to a time and to a show that I just fell in love with. So I'm not going to sit here and complain about it. I was just kind of intrigued to see if they would go somewhere creatively different. But like I said, I'm not going to sit here and complain. Gave me goosebumps, and I'm pretty satisfied with the way that intro came out.
Yeah, I don't really have very many complaints about it either. I posted a leaked version of it that I think came out internationally because maybe it does the rollout on the other side of the world before it makes it to our side of the planet. So somebody else had already made it to the Twitterverse and posted it. I found it, shared it, and I said, I got like increased serotonin levels just listening to it. Like I could feel myself getting happier as it was playing. And that's definitely thanks to how much I enjoyed the show previously. My story is very similar to yours. Actually, I binged it over the course of like 10 days, I think, and got all the way caught up just in time for the season 7 finale that Sunday at the end of my binge. And so, like, I got as caught up as everybody else could be in under 2 weeks. And I listened to that theme song every time. I never hit skip intro. I was always watching how
Yeah.
things would play out. And honestly, with this intro, that is something that's going to be a little bit different, and I want to get you guys' thoughts on it. One of the main things that I noticed from the intro was that there's like a river of blood basically going throughout this edifice, whatever it is that's being made. I think your theory, Sean, on Old Valyria is pretty solid. I have a couple of other possibilities, but I really don't see the intro changing all that much over the course of the show. Like in the previous show, you could kind of see Winterfell up in smoke, or you could see the flayed man instead of the House Stark sigil, depending on who occupied what at what time. I really don't see that happening in this intro because it seems to more or less be covering a history of House Targaryen, because that's basically what the show's about. So unless Martin's willing to alter the course of history that's published in the canon, I really don't see the gears or the cogs or the blood flow changing all that much, depending on how many seasons this show gets.
I think it'd be pretty minor. Like I do. That's the one thing I would say is as it started, I was quickly trying to figure out what was going on, and to me, I only had two conclusions. It's Old Valyria, the the thing he's working on
The
in his room,
scale model city.
or Dragonstone. I don't see how it's got to be one of the two, in my opinion. And that limits what you can do for sure. I think there'll be some very subtle differences, but I don't think you're going to see like the wall breaking down and the map turn into ice or anything like that. Or maybe you will. Maybe the blood will just start to dry up as the Targaryens start to go. I don't know.
Now that's an idea because there are certain members of the houses that are featured, and we'll get to that in a second, that are still around. Some different pieces of the puzzle that are still part of the show right now that could end up dying off in future seasons. So the blood could stop flowing from one of those places should members of that part of the house die. Mike, what are your thoughts on the blood flow and just the scale that this thing seems to be going through? Do you see it as Valyria? Do you see it as Dragonstone, or even something else?
I agree with Sean with his two kind of theories on that. I'm interested to hear what yours are as well. But I'm leaning more towards what Sean said. As far as the intro changing, I don't see them changing it too much, kind of like y'all said. But then again, this show has really kind of shocked me already, so I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of went in a direction that we think they're not going to go, and something dramatic happened in the intro. So we'll see. But as of now, I don't see how that can change.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and get into my theories. I know we don't have a whole lot of time because we're just talking about the intro. We've got a whole bunch of other stuff we can theorize in another episode that we're doing. I am on board with either Valyria or Dragonstone, but I'm going to get a little bit more specific too, and suggest that maybe it's the camera work that is making us think that it's in 3 dimensions. And we mentioned on a previous episode of House of the Empire how important the strategy table that happens in Dragonstone could end up playing. We see it a lot in the first couple of seasons in Game of Thrones with Stannis trying to figure out his plan of attack. I could see, because the blood has to flow somewhere. That's the part that gets to me, is I don't see it dripping down walls necessarily. It all seems to be flowing to a common area. So I think the strategy table at Dragonstone is a possibility because I see it playing a very large piece in the show moving forward. That would be my number one, but I do think that the scale model of Valyria is being made with very deliberate intention, and I could see that actually having actual blood. If somebody gets murdered in the king's room or something like that, we could actually see somebody's physical blood being shed over the scale model. So those are two that I'm very very inclined to believe. Um, Dragonstone probably a little bit less. That would probably be my third idea out of them, because until now, Dragonstone had only been mentioned, and it only gets seen maybe in like one scene. So unless they really, really pick up its use in future episodes and future seasons, I don't know if it's as important of a player as some of those other things that we have already seen in the show.
Man, the entire time leading up to this, we speculated table, table, table. And when the intro started, I ruled out table. And now that you mentioned the camera work and the way the blood flows and how we could be actually in the table right now,
Yeah.
and we know there's a massive time jump. We already had like almost 6 months in between
Mhm.
episodes.
Between episodes.
There's a 10 to 12 year one coming in episode 6. They've already made that public. So I
Hmm.
wonder if the camera goes like this and we see the whole table and the blood is actually flowing all across the table.
Yeah.
I actually think you're right, Zach.
It's very intriguing too.
For this last part of the episode, I actually found someone who had a much better eye looking at this intro than I did. Looking at some of the different sigils and some of the different pieces that we see in the intro, including things like the Doom of Valyria and Aegon the Conqueror's crown. And it goes all the way through the intro, different pieces that are essentially the history of House Targaryen. There is a spelling error at the 27-second mark. It should be Jaehaerys, not Jaehaerys. I don't think there's anybody in any kingdom that would name their king that. But I just find it really, really interesting that it's almost like a history lesson bound within an introduction. And I actually had to go and like look up some of these different parts of the Targaryen dynasty, like Aenys. I didn't know who that was, and then I had to go do a quick search and found out that it's the son of Aegon the Conqueror. So we're basically going from Aegon's crown all the way down to Rhaenyra at the end of the intro, and all of the blood. That the one thing that stood out to me the most is that at the end of all of this, from Balon and Alyssa to Viserys and Emma with the House Aaron sigil, because Emma was originally from House Aaron. All of this blood flow that is converging at one place has almost like a little waterfall effect that is feeding the fiery lava pool that is underneath the House Targaryen sigil. So all of the blood that is being shed feeds into the House Targaryen motto of fire and blood. So guys, taking a look at this timeline, is there anything that like stands out? Is there anything that kind of makes you question where they're going with this? I found it fascinating, but also a little overwhelming at the same time. Sean, any thoughts?
Well, watching the intro, I didn't pick up on it, but when I look at the listing here and when we see what's playing out on screen throughout 2 episodes, I find it mildly curious why Damon comes before Viserys. And
Mhm.
I wonder if we're going to get a little more play on that.
Well, it's interesting because Viserys was named the heir, but I also feel like Damon's just a pretty significant player. He got some pretty significant, important screen time. I wouldn't say he got like a hefty amount, but he got some important screen time in this second episode. And just from what I have read online, I haven't actually read Fire and Blood. I need to get on that. I own a physical hard copy of it. I just haven't sat down to read it. But from what I understand, Damon plays a pretty interesting role once the time jump ensues. There's a lot that's happening now, and then once the time jump happens, there's more that could end up transpiring. Mike, what are your thoughts on the timeline, and is it going to impact the way that you watch the intro next time around?
Oh, 100%, because I think you put it perfectly. This list is overwhelming. Obviously, most of it I did not get watching the intro tonight, and I obviously paid attention to the intro. So I'm very interested to take this list and honestly rewatch the intro after we get off after we get off the show.
Mhm.
And then just kind of dig a little bit more deeper into it. So this is very intriguing, and yeah, I can't wait to take a look at it again.
There's a lot more that we're going to be taking a look at on this channel here on House of the Empire, covering stuff from Game of Thrones, but particularly House of the Dragon. Let's go ahead and roll into final thoughts, guys, on the intro and how it could end up impacting our viewership of the show moving forward. Sean?
Again, I know Mike might disagree. I think they had one choice to make on the intro. The fan base, for the most part, was pissed after season 8. I'm not one of them, but they were pissed. And one way you bring fans back is giving them what's familiar. Well, we had several Game of Thrones themes in episode 1, music and visuals, and then like an actual tie into the actual series, making it not just a 172-year prequel, but it's also a direct prequel to the other show, because of that storyline and how they're tying it together. And I do think that affects the intro too, because really it's part of the same thing. My biggest knock on Star Wars and what they've done lately is we lost the intro and the fanfare. And you don't want to give too much fan service, but I think this is just the right amount. So I hope everyone's happy. I'm thrilled. Now, I don't know if they need to use this intro for any more Game of Thrones properties after this, though, but they probably will.
It could be the one thing that ends up tying the franchises together is having a uniform type of intro, but I guess only time will tell. Mike, final thoughts, and maybe try to include your counter argument to Sean's point as we try to wrap up. What would you like to have seen them do differently if they were to incorporate other instruments or something different into the intro?
Well, it's not. It's hard because it's not something I really disagree with. Obviously, because it's something that still, like I said, I love and still gives me goosebumps and takes me back
Mhm.
to a time in my life, even though it really wasn't that long ago, where it was a show
It
that
was
I've
it was still pre-COVID.
true. True, which feels like forever ago, so
Right.
makes sense. So it takes me back to a time that I just, like I said, fell in love with one of the best shows I have ever seen. So, I just feel like they've done especially in that first episode, a lot of Game of Thrones, nods, and they made you like the words that came out of my mouth when I saw that first episode was, "Wow, this feels like Game of Thrones," and that was without the intro.
Mhm.
So I was just intrigued to see if they could possibly do something different, but I'm not going to sit here and complain about it because I absolutely love that intro. I've seen that intro hundreds of times. So, yeah, I'm not going to play. I'm not going to complain about it, man. Not going to complain about it. I loved it.
Yeah, I don't think there's any complaints on this panel tonight. I very much enjoyed it as well, and I'm intrigued to see how and if anything kind of shifts or changes or adapts as the show evolves. Because we've talked how there's going to be a time jump in this season. There could be time jumps in future seasons moving forward. So that could impact the way that the intro goes. But for now, off to a really solid start, and I'm really excited to see where we go next. If you're interested in hearing some of our other thoughts about House of the Dragon, be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, get some notifications for when other episodes go live. We do a lot of discussions regarding Westeros here on this channel. This is just a little tidbit talking about the first minute and a half. We spent almost 20 minutes talking about the first minute and a half. Imagine how much detail we'll go into talking about entire episodes. But for Sean and Mike, I am Zach saying thanks for tuning in to this episode, and we'll see you next time when the Empire returns.